Welcome back, Buccaneers fans, to another episode of Hear the Cannons, presented by BucsGameday.com, Sports Illustrated's one and only website strictly dedicated to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Head over there right now. We've got tons of information flowing out, tons of projections, a lot of power rankings going out as well. Not as much and free agents wise being signed over the past couple of days as it's kind of trickling down. The Buccaneers, got their main guys out early. But with that being said, my name is Caleb at CHS Noah on X, a writer and reporter here at Bucs Game Day, along with our lead editor, River Wells at River H Wells on X as well. River, how are you doing tonight, brother, before we hop in?
Doing pretty good, long time listener, first time caller. No, I've been here. Yeah, doing pretty good. A lot to talk about. Some new additions since the last time we potted. So we'll get into all that. Let's do it.
So we hit the big ones, which was, obviously the Chris Godwins, Levante Davids of the world, Ben Bredesen's of the world, Hassan Reddick, obviously coming over was huge as well.
Oh, yeah.
So looking at all that, those were the big ones that kind of hit, and we talked about that last week. So a couple guys have kind of trickled in here and there, a couple of re-signings and a couple of guys from outside coming in as well. But looking at guys that the Buccaneers have re-signed, a couple of big ones, not necessarily a huge one here, but backup quarterback Kyle Trask signing on a one-year deal. That's your
Go Gator.
The old Florida Gator there signing a one-year deal. I had written an article saying, maybe Gardner Minshew would be a possibility if Kyle decided to go elsewhere. But I think the Bucs got a pretty
Kansas City where he went. Yeah. So I agree. Kyle knows the system a little bit with Josh Gazard. Got some carryover. Bucs are using a salary cap loophole to keep him on for a little over $1 million, so it's not bad at all either. With that in mind, both from a Trask perspective and from a Bucs perspective, I think the fit makes sense. And Kyle hasn't gotten a lot of chances to play because Baker Mayfield's tough as nails. But if anything were to happen to Baker Mayfield, knock on proverbial wood, Kyle wouldn't be a bad option to kind of get in there and hopefully win you a game or two while he tries to come back.
Absolutely. And there's a little chatter going around, Michael Pratt and Kyle Trask can have a battle for that number 2 spot. I don't think
Kyle Trask always finds himself in battles, doesn't he?
Right. I don't think Michael Pratt's necessarily, quite there yet.
I agree. Yeah, I think it was Trask
for sure. Year, I think, out of college. So he's still got some growing room, but he is one of those guys where you can see the there's something there with him. So the Bucs even getting him last year, I thought that was a great move. But moving ahead here with some of our guys that re-signed, Sterling Shepard last week. Obviously, you got to talk to him today over Zoom at the media availability, as well as cornerback Bryce Hall, who unfortunately suffered a pretty gruesome injury last season that knocked him out after the first game of the season. Coming back to be, I guess, kind of the Buccaneers cornerback 3 there in the room, kind of a similar position he was in last year. Your thoughts on those two guys? I think it's great fits either way, and they know the system, of course.
Yeah, both returners who know the system. We talked to Sterling Shepard today, and he told us that the reason why he came back to the Buccaneers is because of that continuity, right? You got Josh Gazard there in a similar system. You've got the whole offense returning, including him. And he mentioned that last year, you get into training camp from a new team. You're trying to play catch up the whole time, learning the system. Now he knows it. And now that he knows it, you could see him be utilized in a much more effective way. Knowing his role in that offense and Baker Mayfield and his connection kind of continue going from there. And it already showed some signs of being pretty strong last year, right? So when he had some injuries there, Sterling Shepard stepped in, made some great plays, had some drops, but like we said, still getting used to the system. And now he's got it down. Hopefully he'll mitigate those issues and he'll accentuate the chemistry he had with Baker Mayfield. And then Bryce Hall, CP3 for now. I think hopefully running into camp, you might not want that to be the case necessarily, but he definitely knows the system. Really brutal injury, dislocated his ankle like Chris Godwin did, but then also fractured his fibula. So that was pretty rough. Didn't get to play that year, but I like that move because without Bryce Hall, that cornerback depth is looking real thin. And now that he's back, he at least knows the system pretty well. He practiced with it last year, has some experience. So it kind of shores up the depth a little bit in that cornerback room, and it makes it so that, assuming that he can stay healthy, it's not doom and gloom like it was last year when Hall went down and Dean, and then McCollum had some concussions, and then it was brutal. It was brutal. So let's hope that's not the case. And if Bryce Hall can stay healthy, he might be a decent little option. Break glass in case of emergency, and then playing teams too. Playing teams is very important. Bryce Hall will contribute there, and another cornerback that the Bucs got that we'll talk about also will contribute on teams too. So
yeah, absolutely. And I like both moves. I think Sterling Shepard had probably the best season of his career that he's had in quite some time. Even thinking about retirement, coming back because it was Baker Mayfield and an opportunity for him to get playing time. So
yeah,
I think that's great being able to bring him back, especially in depth. He was able to step up in those moments when the Bucs needed him to the most, especially after Chris going down and then Mike missing games as well. So having him there, having that rapport with Baker Mayfield is absolutely huge, in my opinion, and a veteran presence. Obviously, you got Mike and Chris already there in the room, but I think he had mentioned that in his press conference today as well, is that he kind of lets Mike and Chris lead the way, but he'll insert himself whenever he's needed, which is good. It's good to have that type of guy in your locker room. And then with Bryce, it was so unfortunate. I think last year when we were all at training camp, it was like, man, Bryce is just looking like not less necessarily like he was just gonna come out and just play spectacular every single day, but it was consistent.
but solid and consistent and knows the defense, right? And that would have been valuable last year with how the depth ended up shaking out. But he was part of that shaking out the way it did, and unfortunately, he wasn't able to play. So Bucs could have used a guy like him that was healthy, and hopefully, if he stays healthy, he can fulfill that role and kind of go in and out. Especially because guys like Jamel Dean get hurt quite a bit, and then Zion McCollum would be your number one corner right now, and it would be nice to have another one. So we'll see where that goes.
Absolutely, and the whole character thing where the Bucs surround their guys. Bryce is kind of that same mold. I mean, watching every single home game that we were at last year, I would go down to seat level and be able just to watch Bryce interact with fans, throw the football back and forth, sign merchandise and everything for the fans. Even though he was injured, didn't necessarily have to be there. He wanted to be there. Like he cares a lot, and it shows a lot about the character, which fits that mold. So bringing him in or back in, especially off of that injury, is huge. But let's keep things moving. And some of the guys that the Buccaneers here brought in from outside the team that we didn't get a chance to touch on because they came afterwards. We got tackle Charlie Heck. Kind of going to be one of those guys that's going to fill, that role left by Justin School. Maybe the
swing tackle.
Swing tackle is what the big word is on the street these days. Cornerback Kendall Veldor, as well as a guy that you also spoke to today, and Anthony Walker Jr. Outside linebacker or just inside?
Anthony Walker is an inside linebacker. In a straight swap with the Dolphins for KJ Britt.
Right.
So and Anthony Walker has shown some good coverage abilities during the course of his career. He's a little older.
PFF grades,
right? He was a little older. And last year was considered a down year by many graders, and the reason why Caleb is smiling while saying that is because today at his press conference that we were attending via Zoom, he specifically called out PFF's grades, saying if you watch the film, you'll see him a good coverage corner. So he'll want to bring out those tendencies and the ability to secure the middle of the field. I don't think he'll be starting, so that would make it less of a problem, but they're in a pinch, could potentially play special teams. Maybe his age is a little bit older, so that's not a bad pickup. People I see complaining online about, it's just the same KJ Britt, but he's got a lot more experience. He's been in the league, he started, so not bad. Kendall Vildor, who I was talking about earlier, he could be a special teams performer. Especially after losing Tavier Thomas, you want to get another guy on special teams. Unfortunately, he's perhaps most known for the Brandon Ayuk catch in the NFC Championship 2 years ago. But he started games. He's played decently in relief. He started games with those Lions secondary because that Lions secondary got torched just like the Bucs. Brutal breaks across the whole defense really last year. I mean, he got playing time, and there were some ups and downs, of course, but cornerback depth that the Bucs can have with Bryce Hall in case anything goes bad, and special teams contributor in lieu of Tavier Thomas, not a bad pickup. It's about the little things, right? So Jason Light makes these big moves for Hassan Reddick. He brings Chris Cowan back. obviously that's the most important, but how you strengthen your roster beyond that is what wins championships. So the hope is that these players can come in and contribute from a depth level, contribute on teams, and be their next man up mentality, right? So that's pretty important too. And then Charlie Heck's the last one I got to go over, right? Justin School left in free agency to go to the Vikings. He was Tampa Bay swing tackle. He had a rough time against the Lions, but bounced back pretty decently after that, actually, when Tristan Wirfs was hurt. Played some decent football. So you need a good swing tackle to be able to come in there and mitigate the damage, basically, when either Luke Gedeke or Tristan Wirfs is not able to play. And Charlie Heck could be that guy. The Bucs tried him out earlier last year, and now he's back. Full circle moment there. So I think that's a decent pickup too, because you need a swing tackle. It's pretty important. Without School playing the way he did, and now he wasn't amazing, but he was able to play at a decent level to replace Tristan Wirfs, and that's what a swing tackle's for. Yep. Without one of those guys, things can get bad really, really quickly. So I think it's a pretty big pickup there.
Yeah, I think the floor has been raised. Ultimately, when you look at, these guys that are brought in, they're not going to be every down guys. Hopefully, that's the case as the season gets underway, but they raised the floor, in my opinion. They improved from the positions that they were earlier at, or the guys that were earlier there. So I think that overall is going to help the Buccaneers as we move forward in a training camp and forward. But before we get to, I know there's some questions being thrown out here into our comment section. If you guys are watching on X or Facebook, head over to our YouTube. That's how we get these comments in. That's how we get these questions in. One of our watchers, viewers right now, has a question about the NFL draft. We're going to be talking about that a little bit after we do this next little segment here. But if you're watching on X or Facebook, head over to YouTube, BucsGameday. That's all you got to search. Type it in the search bar. Click, 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 click. Subscribe. You'll get notified anytime we're going live, anytime we have videos that we have from press conferences, player interviews, post-game content as well. You will be notified about that. If you're enjoying what we're talking about, enjoying any of our stuff, go ahead and click like as well. But with that being said, River, let's just take a quick peek here because the Buccaneers have a slew, like almost 2 handfuls of players that are still unsigned but still unrestricted free agents. I'm just going to go through this list real quick, and then you kind of discuss, whether or not any of these guys stand out on possibly returning to the Buccaneers or that you think they're going to head elsewhere.
Go for it.
So with that being said, we got outside linebacker Shaquille Barrett, who's second time around with the Buccaneers, obviously an older veteran. Running back Chase Edmonds, safety Mike Edwards, Will Golston, cornerback Troy Hill, safety Ryan Neal, guard Royce Newman, other guard Sua Opeta, and then safety Jordan Whitehead, who the Buccaneers obviously did not pick up his what was it, third year or second year?
He had a second year option on his 2-year contract. Yeah,
and they did not pick that up. So with all that being said, I think that Whitehead is probably likely on his way out. But I'll let you go ahead and expand on these guys a little bit more.
Yeah, I think Whitehead's probably on the way out as well. They got Kayvon Merriweather back. I think he played decently last year in the backstretch, so they might like him there. Ryan Neal's not coming back. I think that was a patchwork thing. Sua Opeta's not coming back either. I think they feel good with the depth they have at guard there. They have Elijah Klein they brought in as well. And Royce Newman, I think, might re-sign as well. That might be pretty cheap, and you can get him in there, play a few different positions. Chase Edmonds is interesting. I could see that happening, actually, but I would say probably not. If I had to give you a quick answer, you got Sean Tucker, Bucky Irving, Rashad White in the backfield there. I don't think any of those three are going anywhere. Bucky Irving and Rashad White can't unless they're traded, and that's probably not going to happen for Bucky. It's definitely not going to happen for Bucky, probably not for Rashad. And then Sean Tucker still has a rookie contract as well. Shaquille Barrett, I don't foresee coming back. Only reason I say that is because Barrett is a really good mentor for these guys, and now you have Hassan Reddick there. Hassan Reddick could potentially still produce pretty well at his age and with his history, and Shaq Barrett has not played up to his previous standards, even his old age, the last 2 years, I think, even when he came back for a short stint. So given that, I don't anticipate him coming back there. I don't see the Bucs be signing a lot of guys, but you never know. I think Newman, of the names that you mentioned, you can always, of course, chime in if there's someone that I missed or didn't talk about, but I think Newman's probably going to come back. And I think for most of those other guys, I don't really see it.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you on all fronts there. For the most part, I do think Newman would be one of those cheaper options that you could
Yeah.
have just to stash a lineman somewhere and have just in case.
Mm-hmm.
But one guy I don't know if you touched on or not, Will Golson.
I think Will Golson's probably going to retire. Last year he could come back. Last year it wasn't until April or I think May that he made his decision, right?
Mhm.
And with a player his age, I think usually the rigors of the offseason at that point, you want to rest and then make your decision. But Bucs are going to be decently deep at defensive depth. They got Greg Gaines back. They're probably going to need to get a guy to replace Golson, but you can go younger. And I just don't see Golson playing anywhere else. Underratedly, next to guys like Vontae David, Golson has been a Buccaneer for a very long time. He's contributed at numerous levels across his career. A pretty good career to be proud of, I think, for William Golston as a Buccaneer. And if he comes back, I think the Bucs will have him in open arms on a pretty cheap deal. But he was thinking about retiring last year, is my thing. And I think this year might be the year that he does. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that would be where I'd lean to. And I think if he were to want to play, the Bucs would try and figure something out for him. But I think he's probably realizing it's time for him to kind of step aside. And even if he's not, done with the game of football, it would be hard to say that Jason White in the front office would not be willing to give him some type of off-field role, and allow him to, stay around with the team. So those are the guys that are left. I'm sure we'll start to see them find new homes or potentially just kind of have to latch on somewhere if they aren't able to, sign new contracts. But with that being said, River, let's get into the fun part of this. What's next? I know we've still got tons. You can continue to sign free agents at this point still up until whenever.
Yeah.
So with that, the next thing on the list is the NFL draft. We've seen what the Buccaneers have done in free agency, the positions that they've addressed, specifically at depth at corner, as well as with an edge rusher and Hassan Reddick. Wide receivers pretty much shored up. Offense as a whole pretty much shored up. Not much that you really have to do on that side of the ball. And it looks like when you're looking at what the Buccaneers' biggest draft needs are, it's going to be that inside linebacker, coverage linebacker type guy. Maybe potentially another edge rusher to kind of build for the future.
Yeah.
Reddick's not getting any younger, and somebody that you can pair with Yaya Diaby later down the road. And then cornerback is still a question mark. You still probably want maybe a guy who could eventually turn into a solidified number one. And then safety as well. I'm not really sure what direction they're going in. We kind of toss ideas back and forth on the potential lineups that the Buccaneers could throw out there and Todd Bowles could throw out there. But we'll start it off with our first question of the night here. How do you guys feel about taking a safety at 19 overall?
I mean, I think they definitely could. They need one. So the safety class outside of Malachi Starks is something to think about, and Starks didn't have the best 40 time, but he was one of the fastest, if not the fastest, I believe, corner or safety in drills, speed-wise, when he was running and doing his drills that way. So Tyke Smith teammate as well, so some chemistry there. And Todd Bowles loves his Georgia Bulldogs because his son played there. His son transferred to Michigan, but there's connections there. I think linebacker and corner are bigger needs. But it gets interesting when you break this down. We're going to start talking draft stuff a lot coming up. But to give you a quick rundown here, I think linebacker is not really a premium position that you usually draft in the first round. And corner is interesting because outside of the top corners, Travis Hunter, number one, in my eyes at least. Then you got Jahdae Barron, who would have feasibly probably been there before the NFL Combine. You ask afterward, and he's probably going to get picked a little bit higher. A lot of different guys there, So that's an option. It's Kobe Bryant for a later pick potentially. Troy Amos is another one. Ole Miss. So those are guys that the Bucs need. And inside linebacker, you can go round one. Jihad Campbell, Jalen Walker. Those are two guys I think Walker projects more as a bit of an edge. And you could do Campbell there too, but I think a lot of teams like him as an inside linebacker. He's actually having surgery on his shoulder. But I think he's rising up draft boards pretty rapidly, actually. You go to like Daniel Jeremiah's big board, and he was picked 14th by the Colts in his latest draft. So he's rising. He might not be there. And in that case, there's a lot of people you can take in the second, third, fourth rounds, day 2 guys. Cody Schwezinger, Danny Stutzman, Oklahoma. You can get one of those guys in the second, third rounds, and that's where a lot of linebackers go to begin with. So that wouldn't be a bad option for the Buccaneers. I think those two are more important than safety, but I wouldn't hate safety at 19 to answer the question. They need one. Like I mentioned, they need someone to play alongside Antoine Winfield Jr. That could be Tyke Smith to get on the field more. But they also probably want Tyke Smith in nickel too. You got Christian Isian who can do all that sort of thing as well. Might be able to shift them around. We'll see what ends up happening. But I think it's definitely a possibility. And they really like a guy like Malachi Starks. And he's available at 19. You got guys like Jihad Campbell are gone. Guys like Johnny Barron are gone. Guys like James Pierce are gone. Then maybe that's an option for them.
Yeah, I find it hard to disagree. I could very easily see the Bucs going with a safety at 19, just because there's probably like 1, 2, 3 safeties out there. You had mentioned Starks. There's also Eamon Wari, who kind of was a freak throughout the NFL combine, looked really, really good. Kind of that.
Oh yeah, for sure, absolutely. I mean, his relative athletic score 10, he really earns the money.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. And I mean, you look at the guys Todd Bowles likes already, right?
Mm-hmm.
They play multiple different positions. It's pretty impressive what Todd's able to do with those sorts of things. But I think it's obviously going to be on the defensive side of the ball. I think corner would probably be your best bet here. I think you could probably still find some coverage linebackers. I don't know, man. It's getting tough out there in free agency. It's also tough in the draft because those guys are really hard.
Coverage linebacker for free agency is probably not what you're looking at the moment.
Right.
A lot of those guys have already been taken. Even like the run stuffer inside linebackers are all basically out the board now. So I'm thinking draft, and be it first round and a guy like Jihad Campbell, or be it second or third round. As I mentioned before, Stutzman, Schwezinger. I think that's probably the route to go.
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on how everything falls in front of them. That's kind of been the MO in the first round, is they kind of see how the draft's unfolding, which is kind of how they landed Graham Barton last year. They thought Barton would be gone, and
they wanted to trade up.
Yeah. And so they weren't going to trade up. They thought about it, weren't going to do it. We're like, oh man, he's going to be gone by the time he gets us. And then he just lands in their lap and ta-da. So being at 19 is not in a bad spot, in my opinion. You could use it on a cornerback. Like all these guys, it's a decent depth-wise class at the cornerback position. So I don't think you can really go wrong. Like you laid out 3 guys, and I can also throw Will Johnson in there as well, a cornerback from Michigan, even though he had that injury last year. But tons of depth at that position. And then obviously you could look at a true edge guy, like the guy out of BC and so forth.
Donovan Ezeraku. Yeah. And
I didn't even want to attempt it, River, because you're much better at that.
Ezeraku, yeah. I tried. If I didn't get that right, my apologies. Bucs have been linked with a guy like that quite a bit, actually. So that's a possibility if they like him. And that depends on, like you just said, where the draft is. Drafts are crapshoots, and everyone thinks they know where it's going, and then they don't. So there's still going to be a lot of shakeups, probably. There's going to be some weird fallers on draft day for whatever reason. We don't know. And the Bucs are used to picking in the middle of this area, for the past few years. That's what happens when you make the playoffs. You can't quite get over the hump. Yeah. So we're going to see what they go with, but I think it's going to be defense. I would be shocked if it wasn't defense. They've been neat at almost every level of defense aside from DT, and they'll probably draft another defensive tackle because the draft is ridiculously deep at defensive tackle this year. So definitely get some rotational guys out in there. I think the Philadelphia Eagles have proven trenches, O-line, D-line. I've said this for a few years now. It's the most important part of building a championship, besides the quarterback. Quarterback's most important part. Second most important part, trenches, just because it's the foundation on both sides of the ball, and being strong and violent at those two areas is how you win football games. And I think Jason Light knows that too. Got a lot of guys like Viavea, Kalijah Cansey on one side. Got a lot of maulers like Tristan Wirfs, Luke Gedeke, Cody Mox done pretty well. 3-time Ben Bredesen, all that stuff. So I think definitely they'll draft that way in the later rounds, but gonna fill those defensive needs first.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to disagree with you there, with you there, River. I'm just totally kidding. I'm not gonna disagree with you at all. I completely agree. The trenches is where games are won, it's where championships are won, off the defense and along the trenches is very, very, very vital in bringing a championship there. If the Bucks guy isn't there at 19, would you anticipate a move back by chance?
Well, it's important to remember too, they don't have a 6th-round pick because of the Carlton Davis trade, and boy does Jason Light like picks. So at some point you might expect him to move around. He usually does every draft at some point, be it day 1 or day 2 or day 3. So yeah, I mean it's possible. I wouldn't mind it at all. I think it's good to stack those resources if you know a guy's going to be there, as long as your intel's right on that. It's not bad. So I wouldn't be surprised. Jason Light likes to do that. He likes to stack his picks. He likes to, amass some capital. So we'll see if he does.
Yep, and then that was our last thing, but we got a last second comment in here on YouTube. Appreciate you guys watching on YouTube, throwing in your comments, throwing your questions. So we're gonna go ahead and get to you from Teehee on YouTube. We should bring back Sua, obviously Opeta, for depth along the offensive line. I know we had touched on this a bit earlier with the Royce Newman and Sua around kind of the same time. But if you want to go ahead and give your thoughts again, River, that would be great.
Yeah, I think I'd probably go with Newman over Sua in that case because Sua unfortunately tore his ACL in training camp last year. Was competing for a job with Ben Bredesen, and I think the job is clearly Ben Bredesen's at the moment with that 3-year deal worth over $20 million. And with that being said, I think it's good to have a guy like Newman there. He's probably going to come cheaper than Opeta in the first place. He's not coming off an injury. So I think someone like that would be a better fit. I think they could bring him back for a cheap deal. He's had experience starting before, and I think that's probably the move there. Opeta might get a chance to play elsewhere, but I think he just had a really bad, unfortunate injury and some bad luck there with how well Bredesen played last year. Played decent to good, and that's what the Bucs need on this line. So I think Newman would be a better choice.
Yeah, and I think if you could get Opeta at like a price for Newman,
sure, but he might want to play. So
why not bring in a potential starting caliber guard to be a depth piece along your offensive line? Why not?
Right.
But
we'll see.
That Newman's not. But Opeta was brought in to, as you mentioned, compete with Bredesen for that starting job and could potentially find himself in a better situation elsewhere, which I think the Bucs will likely grant him, considering the unluckiness that he had the season ago. So I think I'm right there with you. So hopefully, we answered your question. I know a lot of people like Sua Opeta coming in last year. We all were excited about him, but unfortunately, didn't quite work out for either side the way that they wanted it to. So. Tough overall for him. I think the Buccaneers are in a great spot. They're once again not being highly touted as one of the flashy teams in free agency, but they are getting the grades. They're getting the good grades back from everybody who does pay attention to what the Buccaneers and Jason Light are doing, Mike Greenberg as well. So huge props to them. It's great to see that the Buccaneers are still buccaneering. They're still doing what they need to do and filling the holes and in a quiet way that it's not hurting the team, but it's making the team better. And they're not hurting the team down the line in the future as well. But any last thoughts, River?
It's going to be interesting to see what happens because I feel like we know where the Bucs need to go, and that's an interesting spot to be in for a team, right? If Jason Light knows that the Bucs need linebacker, they need corner, and every other team does, then things can start getting pretty interesting with how teams know where you're trying to draft and the position you're at and bargaining chips. And so it'll be fun because I feel like the last few years there's been some BPA stuff going on, a lot of different holes to fill for the Bucs, but with the entire offense coming back, there's a very narrow path to improvement. So I'm excited to see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. The only way is to, either stay on a plateau or, start climbing the mountain and get better. And the one way to do that all Buccaneers fans should know is improve on the defensive side of the ball. We know that's what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to do, and that's what we expect them to do. But with that being said, guys, we appreciate you tuning in. If you're watching anywhere else other than YouTube, head over to our YouTube channel at BucsGameday. Hit subscribe. You'll get notified anytime we're going live. Head over to BucsGameday.com. We've got a ton of content going out there. We'll be shooting stuff out in the morning super early, as we always do, to get your day started with Tampa Bay Buccaneer football. And with that being said, guys, fire the cannons.
Fire.